The dawn broke pale and chill across the small village. Smoke curled lazily from the thatched roofs, and the cocks had only just begun to crow. Inside a narrow mud-brick house near the forest's edge, Amina woke to the sound of sweeping. Her stepmother moved about the hearth with quick, angry motions, muttering beneath her breath. The sharp scrape of the broom on the packed earth stirred the girl from restless sleep. Amina sat up on her thin mat, rubbing her eyes. Her heart still ached with the fresh grief of her father's passing. Weeks ago, a fever had swept through him so swiftly, no healer could save him. Now the house was cold, not just from the weather but from the absence of his laughter and warmth. Since his burial, her stepmother's cruelty had worsened. The woman's sharp tongue had turned to harder things. Missed meals, endless chores, harsh slaps for even the smallest mistake. Amina bore it as best she could, her spirit held fast by the love she still felt for her tiny baby brother, barely 3 months old. He had been her joy since the day he was born, a plump, bright-eyed boy named Cato. Their father had adored him, and Amina had promised to protect him always. But something had changed after the funeral. Her stepmother had grown strange, distant and cold even to the baby. For 2 nights now the child had not been seen. When Amina asked, the woman snapped that he had been sent to stay with relatives in a distant village, for his own good. The lie had tasted bitter. No one had come to collect the baby. No one spoke of relatives. And the house, once filled with Cato's soft cries, was now eerily silent. Amina's heart twisted with dread. As she pulled on her threadbare dress, she could hear the forest birds starting their morning calls. The wind stirred the tall grasses beyond the village. Then, faint but unmistakable, a thin, high-pitched wail drifted through the air. A baby's cry. She froze. It came again, soft, desperate, carried on the wind from the direction of the bush that bordered the village. Her breath caught in her throat. She rose and stepped quietly to the doorway. Her stepmother had her back turned, still sweeping. Amina's gaze swept the clearing beyond their hut. There was no one. The cry echoed once more, thinner now. Her blood ran cold. "Where is Cato?" she whispered aloud, barely able to speak. The broom paused mid-stroke. Her stepmother's shoulders tensed, then relaxed too quickly. "I told you already, foolish girl. He's gone to your father's kin. Do not ask again." But the coldness in her tone, the way her eyes darted to the window, told Amina all she needed to know. The cry had come from the bush. And if her brother was there, alone. She clenched her fists to keep them from trembling. "I heard him," she said quietly, forcing the words out. "He's crying in the bush." The stepmother straightened and turned sharply. "Mind your tongue, Amina. You're hearing things." Her face was pale, her voice tight. "Go fetch water from the well." But Amina didn't move. Her mind raced, heart pounding. She could not ignore that sound. It wasn't her imagination, she had heard it clear as day. And she knew then, without question, her stepmother had done something terrible. As if to mock the woman's lie, the cry rang out again, fainter now but insistent. Amina's throat burned with fear and anger. Her brother was out there, alone, helpless, left to the mercy of the wild. Before her stepmother could bark another order, Amina bolted through the door, feet pounding across the packed earth. Behind her came a furious shout, but she didn't stop. The village still lay in morning quiet. The few people stirring glanced up in surprise as Amina ran past, skirts flying. Her bare feet hit the path that led to the bush, a narrow track marked by tall reeds and tangled undergrowth. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her mind swirled with images, of hyenas prowling in the dark, of snakes slithering unseen. The bush was no place for a child, much less a defenseless baby. She pushed on, branches clawing at her arms and legs. The cry was growing weaker, thin now, almost lost in the wind. "Hold on, Cato," she whispered, voice choked with tears. "I'm coming." The forest pressed in around her. The tall trees loomed, their shadows cool and damp. Every rustle of leaves sent a shiver down her spine. But she would not stop. For what felt like an eternity, she stumbled deeper, following the sound. Then ahead, a small clearing. A shaft of pale morning light broke through the trees. And there, half hidden beneath a thorn bush, lay a bundle of cloth. Amina cried out and rushed forward, falling to her knees. It was Cato, face damp with tears, tiny fists waving weakly. His cries had grown hoarse, his lips pale from hunger. Gently, trembling, she gathered him into her arms. His small body was cold. Her own tears streamed freely now, falling on his brow. "I've got you," she whispered brokenly. "I'm here." She looked around wildly. Had her stepmother truly left him here to die? Alone in the bush where beasts prowled and shadows watched? The thought turned her fear to fury. But even as her rage grew, she sensed something strange, an unsettling quiet in the clearing. The usual hum of insects and birds seemed absent. A stillness lay over the place, thick as mist. And then she felt it, eyes upon her. Her breath caught. Slowly she turned her gaze to the edge of the clearing. In the dim undergrowth, a pair of golden eyes gleamed. Silent. Watchful. A leopard. No, two. Sleek, powerful bodies barely visible among the shadows. Their gaze was not that of predators hungry for prey. They watched her with something deeper, an ancient, knowing patience. Amina froze. Her heart thudded in her chest. The old stories of her grandmother whispered in her mind, tales of spirit beasts, guardians of the wild. Were these such creatures? Had they kept Cato safe when no human hand would? She dared not move. The leopards did not snarl or lunge. They remained still, eyes locked with hers. In that moment, understanding flickered in her heart. They had been here all along, guarding the child. Protecting him when no one else had. Her voice trembled as she spoke softly. Thank you. For a long breath, no sound stirred. Then, one of the leopards blinked slowly, almost as if in reply. Amina knew then, this was no accident. Her brother's life had been spared by something older and deeper than any cruelty her stepmother could wield. But danger was not over. She had to get Cato home, safe, warm, fed. And the path back was long. Clutching her brother close, Amina rose shakily to her feet. The leopards watched but did not move. I will take him now, she whispered. Thank you, for keeping him safe. Slowly, carefully, she began to step back from the clearing. The eyes followed her, unblinking. Her every nerve screamed with fear, but she forced her steps to remain steady. The cries of the forest returned, distant bird calls, the rustle of leaves. The spell seemed to lift. As she reached the edge of the trees, heart pounding, Amina dared a glance back. The leopards were still there, sitting like sentinels in the shadows. And deep in her heart, she knew, this was no ending. It was only the beginning. The morning after Amina had found Cato, she could barely eat or rest. Her mind churned with what she had witnessed, the leopards, silent guardians of her brother through that terrifying night. She had brought him back at first light, arms trembling from exhaustion, feet scraped and raw from running through the wild. But Cato had survived. That, above all, was a miracle. She had slipped quietly back into the house. Her stepmother had not yet stirred, and Amina had wrapped her brother in fresh cloths, feeding him with the thin gruel she could manage to steal from the hearth. Through that long, restless day, she dared not leave his side. Now, 2 days later, the weight of what had happened pressed harder than ever on her chest. Her stepmother had told the village that the boy had been taken to family in the north. She repeated the lie with such cold conviction that most believed her. But Amina knew the truth. And that truth sat bitter in her belly. Still she had no proof. No one would believe her, a child, accusing a grown woman of such cruelty. The villagers respected her stepmother's place in the household, even though many whispered uneasily about her sharp ways since her husband's passing. Amina knew she needed to hear more, to catch her stepmother's own words, to find the truth that would free her brother from the lies being told. So she watched. She waited. It was late one afternoon when her chance came. Amina was sweeping the yard, Cato resting in the sling across her back, when she saw her stepmother step briskly down the path. Her figure moved with purpose toward the neighboring compound where old Mama Cato lived, an elderly widow known for her sharp tongue and sharper ears. Without thinking, Amina trailed behind, heart thudding. She reached the tall grass near Mama Cato's hut and crouched low. The old woman's hut had thin walls of woven reeds, and voices carried easily through them. She heard her stepmother's harsh voice rise first. It was the only way, the woman hissed. The child, that boy was nothing but a burden. My husband's fool of a son. Always crying, always needing. And with him gone, the house and land would pass to me alone. Mama Cato grunted. You say this to me as if it were wise. But you left the boy in the bush? You know what beasts roam there. There was a pause. Then her stepmother spoke again, her tone lower but bitter with anger. I thought the leopards would take him. Or the jackals. The forest would do what needed doing. No one would question it. The child disappears and the matter is done. Amina's breath caught. Her skin prickled cold. Her heart ached with rage. Mama Cato let out a sharp exclamation. Foolish woman. The spirits of the bush are not to be used for wicked ends. Another bitter laugh from her stepmother. What do I care for spirits? It should have been finished. Amina could listen no more. her stomach twisted with fury and grief. Her brother's life had been discarded as though he were nothing. Only by the grace of the wild had he lived. She rose silently, moving back through the tall grass, away from the hut. Her heart raced. She could barely keep her tears from spilling over. The words echoed again and again, "I thought the leopards would take him. What kind of heart could do such a thing?" She reached the edge of the compound and looked toward the forest. The trees stood tall and dark beneath the sinking sun. And in her chest a thought grew fierce: she must never try again. Amina's steps quickened as she returned home. Her brother was safe now, but for how long? Her stepmother had shown what she was capable of. If the lie began to unravel, if she suspected Amina knew the truth, what might she do next? That night, as stars pricked the sky, Amina sat quietly in the doorway, Cato nestled in her arms. The house behind her was dark. Her stepmother had gone to bed. But Amina could not sleep. The memory of the leopard's eyes, golden, watchful, returned to her mind. They had spared her brother when all else had failed. They had stood between him and the death her stepmother had wished upon him. She stared at the forest, its depths thick with shadow and ancient life. And in her heart she made a vow: "I will protect him, whatever it takes." The next day passed with uneasy silence. Her stepmother seemed on edge, snapping at small things, watching Amina with narrowed eyes. Something in her must have sensed the girl's knowledge, though no words were spoken. Amina waited until late afternoon, when the woman left again to visit Mama Cato. She had been gathering her courage all morning, heart set on what she must do. With Cato bound snug to her back, Amina slipped away, toward the bush. The path was quieter this time. The shadows of the trees seemed less menacing, the air warmer somehow. Perhaps the leopards were watching again, she did not know. But she felt their unseen presence and her fear lessened. She found her way to the same clearing where she had first discovered her brother. The grass was flattened where she had knelt, but the thorn bush stood tall once more. She waited there for a time, whispering softly into the air. She spoke of gratitude, of her vow to protect the child. She spoke of the truth she now knew, and of her wish for guidance. The forest listened. And though no leopards appeared, a deep peace settled in her chest. She returned home before dusk, head held high. Her stepmother shot her a cold glance but said nothing. But in the days that followed, the woman grew restless. Whispers from Mama Cato had begun to spread, about strange things in the bush, about the child left for dead who had returned. The villagers, ever hungry for stories, began murmuring behind their hands. Amina watched carefully, waiting for her chance to speak the full truth. It would come. And when it did, she would not be silent. Amina's heart beat fast as she fastened the small bundle of food to her waist, fingers trembling. The house was silent. Her stepmother had gone to market. It was her only chance. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. She glanced once at her sleeping brother, wrapped safely on her cot, then turned toward the edge of the forest. She could not sit by any longer. Her stepmother's words haunted her. Left for the leopards. Her brother had survived once, but would the woman try again? Would she find some other cruel way to make him disappear? Amina knew one truth above all: she could not wait for others to act. No villager would cross her stepmother, not openly. No one would help her. She must do this herself. Drawing a deep breath, she slipped through the gate and onto the path that led toward the wild. The trees loomed ahead, their trunks thick with moss and creeping vines. Shadows stretched between them like dark fingers. The deeper parts of the forest were no place for a young girl, not alone. But Amina's feet carried her forward. Fear prickled her skin, but her resolve burned hotter. "Cato," she called, voice trembling. "Cato, where are you?" Only silence answered, save the rustle of leaves, the soft creak of branches overhead. She pushed deeper into the wild. Each step felt heavier. The air grew thick, damp with unseen mist. Vines snagged at her skirt. Insects buzzed close to her ears. Strange, unblinking eyes watched her from the canopy, monkeys perhaps, or something more. Amina forced her breath to steady. "I must be brave," she told herself. "For him." "Cato," she called again. Her voice echoed oddly through the trees. Still no reply. She paused at a narrow stream, dipping her cloth in the cool water and pressing it to her brow. Sweat trickled down her neck. Her legs ached. But she would not turn back. Somewhere in this vast tangle of green, her brother needed her. The path grew less certain. Where once there had been signs of passage, broken twigs, scuffed dirt, now there was only dense undergrowth. She pushed aside broad leaves, her arms scratched by thorns. The bundle of food thumped softly against her hip. Hours seemed to pass. The sun dipped lower, casting a dim gold light through the trees. The forest felt alive with whispers. Amina's ears caught sounds, a distant grunt, the flap of wings, the hiss of something unseen moving through grass. Her heart thudded. But she pressed on. At last, a narrow clearing opened before her, a place where the trees thinned and patches of sky peeked through. She stumbled into the space, gasping for breath. And there, in the hush of the clearing, something stirred. A flash of movement, a sleek shape darted between the shadows. Amina froze, breath caught. Leopard. She knew the sinewy grace of that form. Her heart hammered in her chest. The great cat did not attack. Instead, it paced the edge of the clearing, golden eyes fixed on her. Behind it, another shape appeared, then another. 3 leopards now, silent and watchful. Amina's knees shook, but she held her ground. Slowly she sank to her knees, palms flat on the earth. I mean no harm, she whispered. I seek only my brother. The leopards watched. Drawing courage from somewhere deep inside, Amina reached for the bundle at her waist. With careful fingers she unwrapped the food, small cakes, dried meat, berries, and laid them on a flat stone. An offering. A gesture of peace. I thank you, she said softly, voice barely more than breath. You saved him once. I saw. For a long moment nothing moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if satisfied, the leopards melted back into the shadows. Their golden eyes flickered once, then vanished. Amina let out a shuddering breath. Her limbs trembled, but relief washed over her. They had not harmed her. They had listened. She rose to her feet, eyes scanning the clearing. A soft sound reached her ears, a faint, muffled cry. Her heart leapt. She turned toward the sound. There, beyond a fallen log tangled with vines, she found a small hollow in the earth. And in that hollow, bundled in leaves and bits of cloth, lay her brother. Cato, she cried, dropping to her knees. The baby stirred, tiny fists waving weakly. His dark eyes blinked up at her, recognizing her touch. He was alive. Tears spilled down Amina's cheeks. She gathered him close, rocking him gently. It's all right, she whispered. I've got you now. For a time she simply held him, heart full. The forest pressed close around them, but the leopards did not return. Only the sounds of the wild remained, birdsong, wind in the branches, the distant murmur of water. Amina knew she could not linger. Night would fall soon. The way back would be dangerous. But with her brother safe in her arms, her fear dimmed. She rose slowly, wrapping Cato securely against her chest with her scarf. Her limbs ached, her body weary, but her spirit burned bright. Turning toward the forest path, she whispered one final thanks to the unseen watchers. Then she began the long walk home. The deeper Amina pushed into the wild, the more the forest seemed to close in around her. Branches clawed at her arms. Thick vines wrapped across the path, forcing her to duck and weave like a shadow slipping through the green. The sun had nearly vanished behind the canopy, and all light beneath the trees now came in patches, thin and cold. Her breath was shallow. Sweat dampened her brow. Her throat ached from calling out. Again and again she whispered her brother's name, Cato, Cato, but only the rustle of leaves replied. Then, just as doubt began to gnaw at her, a subtle change in the air stopped her in her tracks. A hush. A stillness that was not natural. No bird sang. No insect droned. The forest held its breath. Amina's heart leapt into her throat. She stood frozen, straining her ears. From somewhere ahead, through a curtain of hanging vines came a sound, soft, steady, a low rumble like the purr of some great beast. Her limbs felt weak, but a strange calm steadied her. She parted the vines and stepped forward. The bush thinned. Before her opened a small clearing, a hollow space ringed by tall trees and thick undergrowth. The earth here was soft with moss and fallen leaves. And in its center, her breath caught. Cato. There he lay, bundled in a swath of cloth, eyes wide and blinking in the dim light. He was unharmed. Not a scratch marked his skin. His tiny hands reached weakly toward the sky. But he was not alone. Flanking him on either side, like statues of living gold, crouched 2 leopards. They were magnificent, sleek, muscled bodies marked with deep rosettes, their coats shining even in the gloom. One was larger, a male with broad shoulders and an old scar above one eye. The other, slightly smaller, was a female, her gaze fierce yet calm. And those eyes, deep amber, sharp with intelligence, were fixed on Amina. For one terrible instant, her body screamed at her to run. Every story she had ever heard of leopards, swift hunters, silent killers, rose in her mind. But some deeper instinct told her, do not flee. Do not show fear. She stood still. Her heart hammered. Her throat was dry. Slowly she lowered herself to her knees, her palms open and empty before her. I have come for my brother, she whispered, her voice shaking. I mean you no harm. The leopards did not move. Their golden eyes watched her, unblinking. No growl escaped them. No lunge, no snarl. Only a deep, steady presence, like the forest itself was watching through their gaze. Amina felt the hair rise on her arms. The beasts were no ordinary animals. Of that she was certain. Their stillness, their calm, it was as if they understood. Slowly she reached for the bundle of food tied at her side. Moving with great care, she unwrapped a strip of dried meat, laying it gently on the moss before her. An offering. A gesture of respect. The leopard's gaze shifted just slightly. The female's nose twitched. Amina drew a trembling breath. Thank you, she whispered. For guarding him. For sparing him. Still the leopards made no move. They remained at Cato's side, their bodies coiled but relaxed, their eyes never leaving hers. The seconds stretched into minutes. Amina knelt, her legs growing numb. Yet a strange peace began to settle in her chest. The fear ebbed. In its place grew a quiet certainty. She was being allowed here. The leopards, guardians of this wild place, had chosen to protect the child. And now they watched her to see if she was worthy to take him back. I will keep him safe, she whispered. I promise you. Perhaps it was imagination, but the great male seemed to blink once, slowly, as though in acknowledgement. Taking great care, Amina inched forward on her knees. She moved no faster than the swaying of leaves. Every movement was deliberate, respectful. At last she reached the edge of the hollow. Cato blinked up at her, his small face soft with wonder, a faint smile curling his lips. His tiny fists waved in the air. Tears welled in Amina's eyes. Little one, she breathed. Gently, with trembling hands, she gathered him into her arms. The leopards remained motionless. The female's ears twitched but she did not rise. Her gaze followed Amina's every move. Cradling her brother to her chest, Amina bowed her head deeply. Thank you, she whispered again, her voice thick with emotion. I owe you my life, and his. For a long moment, the forest remained utterly still. Then, without warning, the male leopard rose. He turned, sleek muscles rippling, and slipped silently into the undergrowth. The female followed, vanishing like smoke. And just like that, they were gone. Amina sat alone in the clearing, her brother clutched close, her heart pounding. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Relief, awe, gratitude, each emotion tumbled over the next. She looked down at Cato. His wide dark eyes gazed up at her, unafraid. We are safe now, she whispered, voice breaking. Safe. The forest seemed to breathe again. Birds sang softly in the distance. The wind stirred the leaves. Amina rose slowly to her feet. Her body ached with fatigue but her spirit burned bright. She wrapped Cato snug against her chest, securing him with her scarf. Then, sparing one last glance toward the place where the leopards had stood, she turned toward the path home. The forest did not hinder her. Vines seemed to part more easily beneath her hands. The way was clearer than before, as if unseen eyes still watched, guiding her. And in her heart she carried a truth deeper than words. The leopards had not been there by chance. Some force, ancient and wise, had chosen to guard the child. Had chosen to spare him. And now that same force had allowed Amina to reclaim him. She would honor that gift. She would protect her brother with all she had. No matter what her stepmother might do next. Amina's legs trembled as she stood in the clearing, Cato's cries filling her ears. The leopards remained poised, their golden eyes fixed on her, unmoving. The air felt charged, thick with unseen power. The stories her grandmother used to tell came rushing back. Tales of spirit beasts, guardians of the land who chose whom they trusted and whom they devoured. In those stories, only those with pure hearts could survive an encounter with such creatures. She knew then what she had to do. Moving slowly, deliberately, Amina sank to her knees. The earth was cool beneath her skin. She kept her eyes lowered, her hands open and resting on her thighs, her posture one of humility and respect. Her heart pounded, but her voice, when it came, was steady. I know who you are, she whispered into the quiet. I have heard of you in the old tales. You are not beasts but spirits of this place. I am Amina, daughter of Sira, granddaughter of Mosi. I mean no harm. I only ask for my brother's life. A breeze stirred the leaves above her. The leopards remained still, but the tension in the clearing seemed to ease just slightly. Their tails flicked, slow and deliberate. The female's gaze softened, and the great male blinked once, a gesture her grandmother had said was a sign of acknowledgement in the old ways. Encouraged, Amina reached into her bundle and drew out a small cloth-wrapped packet of ground millet and dried fruit. She set it carefully on the moss between herself and the leopards, an offering. "For you," she whispered, bowing her head again. Still no attack came. The leopards watched her closely but allowed her to remain. Taking a steadying breath, Amina slowly untied the scarf that bound Cato to her chest. He whimpered softly, weak from hunger but still alive. Gently, she shifted him to lie in her lap and reached again into her bundle for a small flask of water and a strip of dried meat soaked in broth, food soft enough for him to manage. With trembling fingers she fed him drop by drop, morsel by morsel. Cato latched onto the food eagerly, little fists waving. As she worked, she dared to glance up at the leopards. The female now watched the baby, ears perked forward. The male yawned, a great, slow gesture of calm rather than aggression, and settled down on his haunches. Amina felt tears prick her eyes. "You guarded him," she whispered. "You kept him safe when no one else did. You could have taken him, or left him, but you didn't." Cato's small fingers curled around her thumb. He let out a soft sigh of contentment, the first she had heard since finding him. Amina bent low to kiss his forehead. As she sat there, feeding and rocking her brother, a strange sense of connection grew in the clearing. The leopards seemed less like fearsome predators now, more like sentinels watching over them both. Amina's heart swelled with gratitude. "My grandmother said," she murmured, her voice soft, "that the spirit beasts protect what is innocent, that they see what men cannot. I believe that now." For long minutes the scene remained unchanged. Amina feeding her brother in the shadowed glen, the leopards lying watchful nearby. The forest seemed to hum with life around them, a deep, ancient rhythm as though the trees and earth bore witness to the fragile trust forming there. At last, when Cato had eaten all he could and drifted into a light sleep, Amina dared to move. Very slowly she adjusted her position, cradling him once more against her chest and wrapping him securely in her scarf. "I must take him home," she said softly. "He will not survive another night here." The leopards lifted their heads at her words. The female rose first, stepping lightly around the clearing. For a moment, Amina thought she would block her way, but instead the leopard moved to the edge of the trees, glancing back with a low, rumbling purr. An invitation. Amina's breath caught. Will you show me the way?" The male followed his mate, their movements fluid and silent. Heart pounding, Amina rose carefully to her feet, cradling Cato close. She bowed deeply toward the leopards. "Thank you," she whispered again. "I will never forget." Step by step she followed them. The leopards did not run ahead. They paced her carefully, weaving through the forest at a pace she could manage with her precious burden. The path they chose was clearer, somehow. Roots seemed to move from her path, low branches arched overhead, and the thickest brambles parted just enough to let her pass. Hours seemed to pass in a dream. Amina moved on tired legs, but her resolve burned bright. Each time her strength faltered, she looked to the leopards, calm, powerful, unafraid, and drew from their presence. They did not leave her. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the trees, Amina knew she was close to the forest's edge. The leopards paused atop a low rise, looking back at her one final time. Their eyes gleamed in the morning light, ancient, knowing. Amina stopped and bowed once more, tears streaking her cheeks. "I will keep him safe," she vowed. "You have my word." For a long moment the great cats held her gaze. Then, with fluid grace, they melted back into the shadows, vanishing as silently as they had come. Amina stood alone beneath the brightening sky, her brother stirring softly in her arms. The bond forged in that glen remained deep in her heart, a bond of gratitude, of understanding. And though the leopards were gone, Amina knew, should she ever need them again, they would hear her call. Amina drew her scarf more tightly around Cato as the first hints of dawn lit the canopy overhead. Her brother, weak but alive, stirred faintly against her chest. His small breaths warmed her collarbone, fragile yet determined. Every step she took felt heavy, as though the weight of their survival pressed on her shoulders. She glanced once more toward the dense line of trees from which the leopards had disappeared. Though unseen, she could still feel their presence, a deep, instinctual knowing that they watched over her. She whispered her thanks once more into the morning air, then steeled herself for the long journey home. The forest was no place for a child, much less one as young as Cato. And though Amina had found the strength to venture this far on love and desperation alone, the return would be no easier. The shadows between the trees still held unknown dangers: serpents, wild boar, sharp stones, and worse. The path, if there had ever been one, was lost beneath leaves and tangled vines. But something had changed. As she began walking, the way seemed softer, more open. Where thick brambles had scratched her arms the night before, now thin gaps revealed themselves. Roots that had once tripped her seemed to pull gently aside. Even the tall grasses leaned, parting before her careful steps. It was as though the forest itself had acknowledged her cause, and had chosen to aid her. She pressed on with cautious hope, moving slowly so as not to disturb Cato. Her arms ached, her legs burned with fatigue, but her spirit refused to waver. Every so often she caught the faintest flicker of movement among the trees, an ear twitching, a tail disappearing. The leopards followed, silent as breath, unseen yet undeniably close. Their unseen presence was both a comfort and a reminder of the gravity of her task. More than once, Amina paused beneath towering fig trees to adjust Cato's wrappings or rest her back. When she did, she whispered softly, not to the child alone, but to the spirit she sensed around her. "Thank you," she would murmur, voice barely audible. "I will not fail him." Hours passed this way, each step drawing her closer to the forest's edge. Morning light pierced the canopy in bright shafts, scattering shadows and glimmering on dew-soaked leaves. Birdsong began to fill the air, tentative at first, then louder as the sun rose. Amina's spirits lifted, but she remained wary. They had left behind the deeper wild, but danger still lingered. Once, the sudden crack of a branch ahead froze her in place. She crouched low, clutching Cato tightly, heart racing. A boar, massive and tusked, snorted and pawed at the ground just ahead. Before Amina could even think to retreat, a low, guttural growl resonated through the underbrush. The boar's head shot up, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. Without warning, it turned and fled, crashing through the trees in a panicked retreat. Amina let out a shaky breath. She did not see the leopards, but she knew they were near. Her protectors still watched. Gratitude surged within her, giving her tired body new strength. She pressed on. As the sun climbed higher, sweat slicked her brow, and her stomach clenched with hunger. Her small bundle of food had long since been emptied. Still she would not stop, not until Cato was safely home. He whimpered faintly now and then, seeking comfort, and each sound renewed her determination. At midday the terrain began to slope downward. Through the trees ahead, Amina glimpsed flickers of sunlight too bright to be trapped beneath the canopy. The edge of the forest, home, was near. Her heart surged with hope, but caution kept her steady. She slowed her steps, listening for any sound of threat. Then, movement. To her left, through the thickets, the sleek form of the female leopard emerged, her golden eyes watchful but calm. She padded forward a few paces, paused, then looked back over her shoulder. Amina understood. "You would guide me?" she whispered softly. The leopard blinked once, slowly. Then it turned and padded gracefully down the slope, pausing now and again to ensure Amina followed. With renewed resolve, Amina adjusted Cato once more and followed. Down through the thinning trees they moved together, girl, child, and guardian. The male leopard remained unseen, though Amina felt his steady presence somewhere behind her, always watching. When they reached the final stand of trees, Amina halted. Through the last screen of branches she could see the first scattered huts of the village, her home. Smoke drifted lazily from cook fires. Figures moved about in the distance. Her heart tightened. What would the villagers say? What would her stepmother do when they saw Cato alive and safe in her arms? She glanced toward the leopard. The great cat met her gaze, silent but reassuring. "I am not afraid," Amina whispered. And she meant it. With careful steps she crossed the final line of trees. As her bare feet touched the beaten dirt path she felt a shift, like a threshold crossed from one world into another. Behind her, the leopard gave a low rumble, neither warning nor farewell but something deeper, older. Amina turned to bow deeply, tears filling her eyes. "Thank you," she. Amina's bare feet pressed into the dust of the village path as she stepped forward, the morning sun now high above. Her arms tightened around Cato, who had drifted into a soft sleep against her chest. Every eye she passed seemed to widen in disbelief. The first to see her were the women at the well. They dropped their water jars in shock, one of them gasping aloud. "It's her. Amina, she's back. And the child?" In moments, word rippled like wildfire through the village streets. People abandoned their morning work, stepping from homes and fields, their faces marked with curiosity and awe. The sound of feet on packed earth grew as more villagers poured in, forming a loose crowd that trailed after her as she walked. Amina kept her gaze forward, her chin lifted with quiet strength. There was no room left for fear. Not now. At the edge of the crowd, near the central square, her stepmother appeared, pale as linen, trembling as if her legs would give way beneath her. Her sharp, haughty expression had vanished, replaced with disbelief and growing dread. She stumbled toward Amina, voice shaking. You dare return? Where? How is this possible? The villagers turned, their gazes now sharp with suspicion. Many had known, or at least whispered, of her cruelty, her resentment toward Amina, her dislike of the baby boy born after her own failed attempts to produce children. But none had expected this, for the girl to emerge from the wild, brother alive in her arms. Amina stopped several paces short of her stepmother and looked her full in the face. "Cato lives," she said, her voice steady. "And he did not die in the bush, though someone surely meant him to." A loud murmur swept through the watching crowd. The villagers began trading glances, some with disbelief, others with dawning understanding. From the trees behind them, a sudden shift in the air stilled the murmurs. Heads turned. At the forest's edge, where the shadows lingered beneath broad-leaved branches, twin golden eyes gleamed. One leopard, tall and lean, watched the gathering crowd in silence. Then another set of eyes appeared, low to the ground, a second leopard crouched beside the first, muscles tense beneath its dappled pelt. Gasps echoed from the villagers. Mothers drew their children close. The older men stiffened, hands reaching instinctively toward tools or staffs. But no one moved toward the animals. The leopards did not attack. They stood, silent, watching, their calm presence more unsettling than any sudden threat. Amina turned, her heart full of emotion. She met those glowing eyes once more, offering a small bow of her head. In response, the first leopard blinked slowly, then returned its gaze to the crowd. The meaning was clear, even to the villagers who still clutched their fear. The leopards were not hunting today. They were guardians. They had followed Amina, not as prey but in protection. An old woman near the well spoke first, her voice reverent. "It is the old tales, the spirit beasts of the forest. The girl is watched by them." Another voice called out, an elder known for wisdom. "Such a thing is not for nothing. The leopards guard her because the truth walks with her." Eyes swung once more toward Amina's stepmother, whose face had gone nearly white. Her mouth opened, then shut again as if words failed her. Amina's voice rang clear over the murmurs. "I went into the bush," she said. "I found Cato alive. And these," she nodded toward the leopards, "watched over him until I came." The crowd stood spellbound. Some made protective signs across their chests. Others looked on with newfound respect. Suddenly emboldened, one of the village men stepped forward. "Speak, woman," he demanded of the stepmother. "How did this child come to be left in the bush?" The stepmother's mouth worked furiously, but no sound came. Sweat broke across her brow. From the back of the crowd, another voice called, older and rough. "I heard her myself," an old neighbor declared. She spoke of it in her own words, how she left the babe for the wild beasts. The villagers drew in sharp breaths. The mood shifted palpably, fear gave way to anger, disbelief to judgment. The stepmother swayed on her feet, her eyes darting left and right as though seeking escape. Amina stepped forward, her gaze never wavering. "You cast him out to die. And yet, the spirits of the forest chose differently." The crowd surged forward, the villagers no longer content to stand idle. Questions flew. Cries of outrage rose. The village elder raised his hand, commanding silence. "We will not decide this in a storm of voices," he said firmly. "There will be counsel." The villagers nodded, the authority in his tone undeniable. The stepmother, visibly trembling, found her voice at last. "It was not. She lies. I only—" But her words rang hollow against the weight of all they had seen. The child returned unharmed, the leopards watching from the shadows, the truth laid bare in Amina's calm resolve. One by one, the villagers turned their backs on the stepmother's protests and faced Amina instead. A girl once treated as little more than a servant now stood in the center of the square, her brother safe in her arms, protected by the forest itself. And the leopards still watched. The sun climbed higher as the crowd swelled around the square. Villagers who had not witnessed Amina's return now arrived, drawn by the rumors spreading from house to house. Amina was back, carrying her baby brother, and the leopards from the deep bush watched over them. The elder council gathered at the center, seated on carved wooden stools. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp with curiosity and concern. The air was tense, humming with unspoken questions. The leopards remained at the forest's edge, motionless save for the flick of a tail or the blink of watchful eyes. No one dared approach them. At the council's signal, Amina stepped forward, her arms still wrapped protectively around little Cato, who dozed peacefully against her chest. The murmuring of the villagers faded to silence. "Speak, child," the eldest counselor said. "Tell us what has passed." Amina lifted her chin. Her voice, though young, rang with quiet authority. "I heard her speak," she began, glancing toward her pale, trembling stepmother. "She told the neighbor that she had left my brother in the bush, alone, to be taken by wild beasts." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. All eyes swung to the stepmother, whose face had gone sheet white. She opened her mouth to protest, but her voice caught in her throat. Amina continued. "I went after him. I found Cato deep in the bush. He was alive, guarded by the leopards you see there now." Another shiver of awe passed through the villagers as they glanced again toward the shadowed figures at the forest's edge. One of the elders leaned forward. "You say the leopards did not harm you?" "They watched me," Amina answered. "They allowed me to come near my brother. They followed us back. I believe they knew the truth." The murmurs grew louder, some voices edged with fear, others with wonder. At the elder's gesture, the stepmother was brought to stand before the council. Her knees shook visibly. Sweat beaded on her brow. She could not stop glancing at the leopards, her fear of them clear. "You have heard the girl's words," the elder said gravely. "What say you? Did you leave the child to die?" The stepmother wrung her hands, voice shrill. It was not as she says. The child, he cried too much. He would not be missed." A stunned silence fell. Another elder spoke coldly. "Not missed? Your husband's son. Flesh of your own house." The stepmother's voice faltered. Her eyes darted wildly around the crowd, seeking some ally, but none met her gaze. The villagers, once silent observers, now looked on with open judgment. The elder pressed further. "And you did not think to tell anyone? You did not ask for help?" She shook her head helplessly. I feared, the child, her excuses tangled into nonsense." The eldest counselor's voice hardened. "You meant him to perish. That is clear." The stepmother's shoulders sagged. Her hands gripped her skirt so tightly her knuckles whitened. The counselor turned to the crowd. "You have heard her confession. You have seen the child returned. And you see the leopards, guardians of the truth this day." A deep murmur rose among the villagers, anger, shame, a collective sense of outrage. One man called out, "She would have left him to die. Let justice be done." Another voice echoed, "She should answer for it before us all." The leopards shifted at the forest edge, not moving toward the crowd but a slow, deliberate lift of their heads. The villagers fell silent once more. The counselor spoke with measured gravity. "There will be justice. And it will be seen by all." Amina held Cato closer. Relief mixed with sorrow in her heart. The truth had been spoken, and heard. Her stepmother stood, swaying, her face ashen beneath the weight of so many eyes. Justice had begun to turn. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village square. The council's judgment was swift. "For the crime of abandoning an innocent child to death in the wild," the elder pronounced, "you are no longer welcome in this village. You are to leave at once and never return." The villagers, gathered in solemn witness, nodded their grim approval. None rose to defend the stepmother. Her guilt lay bare before all. Pale and trembling, the woman stumbled back from the council, her gaze darting toward the leopards still watching from the forest's edge. No words of protest came. Head bowed in defeat, she fled toward her house, to gather what little she could before her banishment took full force. No one followed. No one spoke to her. In the silence that followed, Amina stood with Cato still resting peacefully in her arms. The weight of the moment pressed upon her, not fear, not sadness, but something older, deeper. At the edge of the square, the two leopards stirred. Slowly, with grace and strength, they turned from the watching crowd. Their golden eyes met Amina's one last time, a lingering gaze full of unspoken meaning. Then, with silent steps, they melted back into the forest shadows. The villagers watched in awe as the great cats disappeared, no longer guardians of the square but once again spirits of the wild. No one chased them. No one dared. A breath seemed to release from the village all at once. The danger was gone, but something had changed forever. From that day on, whispers of Amina spread among the people. "She walks with the wild," some said. "She is protected by the spirit beasts," others murmured. "She speaks truth, none should cross her." Where once she had been a quiet, unremarkable girl, tending the baby, doing the chores others ignored, now the villagers looked upon her with reverence and respect. Mothers watched her with new eyes. Fathers told their children of her courage. Young ones whispered her name with awe. Even the council, in private words, spoke of her bravery and the justice that had come to pass. Amina returned to her modest home with Cato, her heart full yet calm. The wild had marked her now, not just with the memory of the leopards, but with a strength that could not be taken. And though the leopards had vanished back into the bush from that day forward, whenever she passed by the edge of the trees, the villagers would pause and watch, wondering if unseen eyes still followed her path. For in their hearts they knew. Amina was now more than just a village girl. She was the one who walked with the wild. Time moved forward as it always does. The seasons shifted, rains came and went, the great trees thickened with new green, and in the fields life grew. The stepmother had long since vanished, her name no longer spoken except in warnings to the young. Amina's small house, once so quiet and dim, now rang with laughter and warmth. Cato, growing strong with each passing day, toddled through the rooms with bright eyes and quick feet. His laughter was music to Amina's heart. She raised him with fierce love, the bond between them unshakable. No longer a girl burdened by fear or cruelty, Amina stood tall, strong in spirit, known and respected among her people. When she walked through the village now, neighbors greeted her with warmth, some with gratitude. The village itself seemed changed since that long night. Where once the wild had been feared, now it was honored. The villagers no longer spoke of the forest with dread but with respect. Children were told of the leopards who had guarded a child of innocence. Hunters offered thanks before stepping into the woods, and when they returned, they spoke softly of strange paths opening before them or unseen watchers in the shadows. Amina alone understood. The bond between her and the forest had not faded. She felt it even now, the subtle hum beneath her feet, the gentle whisper of leaves in the wind. When she ventured to the forest's edge with Cato by her side, the trees seemed to sway in welcome. And sometimes, when the moon hung high and full in the velvet sky, Amina would step quietly into the clearing where once she had found her brother. She would stand in the silver light holding Cato's small hand. And then, from the shadows, a gleam of gold, two pairs of eyes watching. Silent, steady, no threat, only presence. The leopards had never left entirely. They remained, unseen by most, protectors of balance, guardians of truth. In those moments, Amina would bow her head, offering thanks, not in words but in her heart. Cato would giggle softly, sensing no fear, only wonder. The village too had learned. On nights of the full moon, people would speak in hushed voices, lighting small candles in their homes. For they knew, loyalty and courage were never forgotten by the wild. And the bond between girl, brother, and forest remained unbroken. Amina's life was no longer the life of a frightened child. It was one of purpose, of love. She had faced darkness, clawed through it, and emerged stronger. The wild had seen her heart and answered. And so, in the years that followed, her name remained on the villagers' lips, not in fear or pity but in respect. For Amina had begun anew. And the wild still watched. Whispered again. I will never forget. When she rose, the leopards were gone. Only the soft rustle of leaves remained, and the bright sky above. Holding Cato close, Amina squared her shoulders and began the final steps toward the village. The journey back was complete. Now the greater test awaited.